one of the things that people don't like in the industry that I do on my blog is tell the truth. I'm a realist. I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm professional, but my job as I see it is to educate the market and set proper expectation. And what I always say to people is, do you care about the size of the market or do you care about profitability and sustainability?
Hey, it's E.B. Moss, Head of Content Strategy for MediaVillage. You know us. We're the home of the knowledge exchange, connecting media, marketing, advertising, and entertainment through knowledge, research, and the advancement of diversity. Today, I have an incredible guest. I had the opportunity to speak with him during one of the NAB Show NY podcasts that I recorded because he is the head of the Streaming Summit. Dan is an incredible guest, so take a listen to some of the insights from Dan Rayburn, one of the foremost experts in streaming and OTT. Hey, it's E.B. Moss for MediaVillage. I'm the head of content strategy, and I have a really great strategist with me today. He also happens to know a lot about the technical side. He is Dan Rayburn, and he just came out of overseeing the entire streaming summit that was conducted at the NAB Show New York. He helped build that summit out, but he's got a pretty amazing bio. I want to tell you a little bit about Dan Rayburn. He is, as I said, chairman of the Streaming Summit, which takes place every year, but he's also considered one of the foremost authorities on streaming media, technology, and online video business models. He was the EVP for streamingmedia.com. He has been, or actually still works as the principal analyst at a research and consulting firm, Frost & Sullivan, and publishes market data analysis on streaming media and tech trends. And he's former United States Air Force and Air National Guard. Hey, Dan, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me today.
This was great because we spoke during the podcast that I produced for the NAB Show New York before the summit. And it was such an interesting conversation that I really just wanted to do a slightly deeper dive and really get inside your brain and share more about the world of streaming. You are, as I said on that podcast, something of a wonk. You've been interviewed, published on New York Times, CNN, HuffPost, Fortune, NPR, the NAB Show podcast, and now Insider InSites podcast, but there's a whole lineup of them. And one of my favorite little things is that I think back in 95, you were an early certified systems engineer on Apple computers.
That's how I got started. And my background is interesting. I've never been to college, and fortunately I learned all this stuff just sort of on the fly, self-taught. And, my friends kind of make fun of me when they see me on MSNBC or CNN talking about tech, having no idea what on earth I'm saying. But, yeah, Apple really gave me my start coming right out of the military in 1995. One of the first large-scale music events ever on the Internet was the Apple Macintosh New York Music Festival.
Wow.
And it was only dial-up, audio only. And it was about about 20 clubs in New York City. I think it was See You, See Me back then. It's been so long. But, yeah, that's kind of really where it all started in around 95.
That's crazy. So you went from being in the military to landing that job. Did you have technical training in the Air Force?
Oh, God, no. No.
Really?
No, there was, this was really just before the Internet had started. I went into the military in 92. So there was no internet at the time. Spent some time active duty, and then came out and did National Guard. And then that was right around the time when the internet kind of just started, and we had dial-up and AOL chat rooms and all that. And I raised $75,000 from a friend and co-founded a live streaming company where we were doing a lot of production.
Wait, you raised money for a live streaming company before the internet existed.
Yes.
Who is this friend, and can I have his number?
Unfortunately, he passed away.
Oh.
Yeah, he was an individual that was actually a lawyer, and he was well respected in his field. And he kind of saw what I was doing early on, and thought, hey, this is a pretty good investment. And then, fast forward a couple years later, we sold the company for $70 million.
Stop it.
At 24 years old.
Can I have your number?
No, because I don't have $70 million or anything close to it. Everybody thinks, oh, you got $70 million. Nope. Not even seven figures, not even high six figures.
What happened?
Well, you have the dot-com bubble burst. So what happens
yes,
is
you do.
most of those deals back in those days are done in stock. And then you have a vesting period and you have to hold it. So people run around thinking, these deals are worth a lot of money. But, the reality is it's on paper. Nothing's real until you cash it in.
Right.
So it was an interesting experience to go through. It was great to learn at 24. And then I just started another company, another mini company inside a small ISP here in New York City, which was a company called Bell Technology. And then the internet hit, and they went out and raised $600 million in a bond offering, did an IPO, and that was the heyday between 98 and 2002. Everything was streaming online, and we were doing like the Bill Clinton testimony back then. That was one of the most widely watched things at the time, and everybody knows typically about the Victoria's Secret event in 98 that wasn't very good, but that was really the start of this industry, and there was some amazing technology back then being developed, and it was coming out so quickly with companies trying to top one another. But the flip side was, after the dot-com bubble burst, we lost about $5 trillion in the market because investors just put so much money into these companies with absolutely no understanding of how they were ever going to make money.
Wow.
So it was good at growing the industry. It was bad in that there was a lot of greed and excess and waste, and unfortunately people just really misbehaving badly with money that they were given.
Yeah, we spawned some good movies off of that,
Yes,
though.
yes.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, there have been, and there were, those are some interesting days, but, the biggest thing you look back there is you learn a lot of what not to do by watching others.
Yes.
And so I hope we never go back to that time again. I don't think we will, because it was just too much money put into people who were extremely young, didn't have any business experience,
Yeah.
and also many weren't interested in growing a company or building anything. That's what was missing. They wanted to start a company, flip it in 6 months, and make money. And that's typically when businesses are not successful.
Well, hopefully we're not facing similar times. There is projections that the global OTT revenue space is going to hit $129 billion in 2023. We talked a little bit about that, but clearly you're bullish on OTT and streaming. And do you fear for the longevity or the sustainability of the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one I love to talk about, because one of the things that people don't like in the industry that I do on my blog is tell the truth. I'm a realist. I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm professional, but my job as I see it is to educate the market and set proper expectations. So some of these numbers we're seeing are flat out wrong. The methodology behind them does not make sense. And what I always say to people is, do you care about the size of the market, or do you care about profitability and sustainability?
Right.
Companies should be measured obviously based on revenue, but they should also be measured based on profitability. And that's something you don't see a lot. Just look across the entire tech stack of Uber or anybody like that.
Yeah.
In the video world, the good news is a lot of these services are run by larger companies that have a business model. Think Disney, think Apple, think AT&T, even though AT&T is completely in debt. But you have a lot of good companies behind them. So I don't think we go back to that time, but we've definitely seen money put into different segments of the online video industry that really just can't survive long term.
Well, I want to talk about some of the opportunities, and if you had a crystal ball, where you think the biggest upside is. And there are so many different ways to monetize streaming and OTT, whether it's AVOD or SVOD or whatever the heck they're called. Where do you think the growth will be?
I think the growth comes across from a lot of different services. People want to talk Disney, Netflix, really big services. But I think you also have growth along niche services. So when you look at somebody like an Acorn TV that's just doing British documentaries or British shows, you have other services like that that'll come out that are very specific that I think can do well. And I don't think services should be judged just based on the number of subscribers they have.
Right.
It should be judged based on the user experience, the quality of the content and video that's being produced and delivered, how easy is it to consume, what do consumers adopt? They adopt what's easy. So many times companies will try and integrate the latest and greatest technology, but then it ruins the user experience.
Well, it's funny that you say that word experience a couple of times there. In one of my more recent podcasts, I interviewed several female CMOs, and the through line was experience marketing, and that we're in an experience marketplace, an experience economy, and that companies, media companies, are neglecting to pay attention to that user experience. I have trouble, for example, trying to pick something on Netflix. There's an embarrassment of riches of content. So how do we solve for the user experience in these services?
It's a great question, and it's one that the industry is really struggling with, because with great content and choice comes fragmentation and being overwhelmed. So how do you find the content you want? Well, a lot of these companies are working obviously on their recommendation engine that says, because you watch this, we want to recommend that, which is great. But the issue is the user experience. I think the biggest thing lacking there is you have to have methodology, right? I'm an analyst. I care about data. Anybody can come up with an opinion, but you have to separate facts from opinions. And the data really allows you to look at what is it consumers are looking for and that they want. So when you're talking about user experience, you have to define it. Is that user experience the quality of the video based on how quickly it starts up, or what we call frustration time?
Right.
Other terms are
I call
time
it
to first
consumer
frame.
piss off.
Yes, same thing. Is it rebuffering, where the video stops and has to rebuffer? Is it the navigation? I can't find what I want or how to get to it. Is it the search functionality, where you can't find certain keywords because the metadata is not put in with the content? So first, these companies have to define what a good user experience is. Second, they need to know, what do consumers actually want? Because it's amazing how many times you see companies do something and then afterwards consumers don't like it, and then they go, oh, well, that's what we thought you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, you need to know beforehand.
Sorry, based on...
So guessing, really.
Yeah.
So we need more data and analytics in the market. That would definitely help as well.
So that's the personalization aspect, yeah?
Yes, that's the personalization. And then if you think about just the technology itself, we're talking about OTT today, but stream media, the technology itself powers enterprise communications, Fortune 500 inside the firewall. It's for military and government. There's so many use cases where the technology is just thought of as another communications tool. And that's where we need to get with OTT, is we shouldn't be talking about, outside the industry, of course, we shouldn't be talking about bit rates and aspect ratios and codec and frame rates and latency, because do consumers care?
No, my eyes are going to roll back in my head right now.
There you go. You're going to take a nap right now if I keep talking. So the point is, we got to get past all that, right? This is just about the consumer experience and how you define it.
Okay. And what about in terms of the tonnage of services out there? Because there is, the overwhelm aspect of terminology for the consumer, but there's the overwhelm aspect of choice, and more coming. How do we differentiate? How do we streamline that in streaming?
Yeah, it's hard. So all these services are trying to figure out, how do they differentiate one to the other? Is it original content? Is it depth and breadth of catalog? So I use the example, when Netflix came out with their streaming service and really started this space from a subscription standpoint, at one point Netflix used to talk about the number of titles they had available. I think it was 80,000 at one point. And that was their selling point, is we have depth and breadth of catalog. Well, once Amazon came along and started licensing a lot of the same content for Prime, you'll notice Netflix changed their tune to, well, we have a lot of original content now.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at Netflix now, 7-8 years later, they've actually shrunk the size of the catalog, but said to consumers, even though we're giving you less choice, we think the content we're giving you is higher quality, and it will keep you on our service. Very interesting dynamic there. But the difference is, now you have these services that are coming out that are being specifically targeted to a niche. Or Disney Plus, it's targeting families and family-friendly content. Disney Plus is never going to make Orange is the New Black. That would never happen. You have Peacock coming out. You have Apple coming out. You have HBO Max coming out. You have Quibi coming out. You have a lot of content coming out. And as a result, this year and next year alone, it's somewhere north of $40 billion that these guys are spending on licensing or producing original content. So as a consumer, you're really going to have to decide, where do you want to spend your money? And more importantly, we are all bombarded every day with so much content that we have a limited amount of time that we can consume it. So everybody is vying for our eyeballs, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, streaming services, reading news. We can only consume so much.
Yes. We had talked also about on the NAB podcast that it's not a solution. You know, some people have said, oh, so what's going to happen? It's going to go back to the old cable company days of aggregation. And I know that you don't feel that way. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, go a little bit deeper.
Well, aggregation is something this industry has talked about for 25 years. And it's the idea that instead of going to Hulu and to Netflix and Amazon and all these different places for the content, you'll go to one website, which will contain all the services, and you'll just have one account and have to sign in and pay one provider. Mm-hmm. That sounds great as a consumer.
Yes.
Does not work in reality.
Oh.
And here's why. What is the benefit of Disney or Netflix working with somebody else?
Right.
There isn't one.
Right.
There's no business benefit to their bottom line. I'll give you another example as another analogy. It's people who say, well, when the rights to the NFL games expire on TV in a couple years, Google or Netflix or somebody is going to bid $15 or $20 billion to put it online only. And I go, well, the NFL is a business that is looking to make as much profits as it can. Why would it lose money by licensing it online only when the TV broadcasters can give them more money? So, and then people go, well, because it's what consumers want. And I go, well, they're not doing what consumers want. They're doing what's best for their business. They are a business. So these companies all have to do a bit of a trade-off because they do want to give consumers, obviously, access to content, but they also need to restrict it. It's part of the business, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. You know, as a marketer, I think about the need to really communicate that differentiation, whether it's Acorn or Disney. And I think, too, the keynote that the global head of marketing for Disney products and experiences did at the ANA. And it was about leveraging emotion. And, of course, Disney is one of the most clear-cut brands. But how is a Tubi or a Roku or whatever going to market itself and curry that emotion, that preference among this sea of options? I think it's got to come down to, I want to live on Netflix. I want to live on, Quibi.
Right. Well, I'd say three answers to that. One, sometimes it's the platform. You're already in the Apple ecosystem. You're already in the Google ecosystem.
So ease of use.
Ease of use, and also you have other products or services that tie into that content offering. Second, I would say, is whether or not you want to pay for it. So right now, walking here in Times Square, there are Tubi billboards everywhere calling out Netflix, basically saying, well, with Tubi, it's free.
And many Disney characters trying to get me to pay them for a picture.
That as well, half of them being arrested by the police, it seems. But, to me, that's a little bit of an unfair apples-to-apples comparison because Tubi doesn't have any original content that at the quality or the quality that Netflix has. Mm-hmm. So it's not a complete apples-to-apples comparison there. And then I'd say the third thing is, what type of content do you want to watch? What is the business model you want it in? And what is the quality? Mm-hmm. So someone like Quibi is saying, well, we don't want to target the living room right now because it's so crowded. Mm-hmm. But what services are specifically built for mobile? Very few. Oh. So they're identifying what they think is a gap in the market, and then they're going to target that specifically. So that allows them from a marketing standpoint, from a customer acquisition standpoint, to spend money just on that.
Got it. So that they have to communicate to me that that's what their offering is, that if I'm on mobile, I'm going to...
They need to communicate what the value is to a younger audience of consuming that content on mobile, and they've cut a lot of deals, licensing deals, to get original content from folks who are very well known in the space and brands, and also licensing some content. But what success will they have? Too early to know.
You've referenced sports a couple of times, and that leads me to want to drill down a little bit on verticals. So how niche can we get? Do you see us moving towards some of that content being carved out by vertical interests?
Yes, it is already. So there are so many OTT services that you don't hear about because they're specifically targeting a use case. So, if you look on the Roku lineup, just the number of channels they have. If you're interested in military videos, they have something you can sign up just for that. If you like animal videos, they've got a subscription for that. They've got one just for car racing. They have cycling, and they have pretty much any sport you can think of. I mean, even if you're into badminton, I was amazed to find that there's a badminton streaming service. Okay, cool. Probably outside the U.S. But there's so many services out there. By last count, there was more than 1,000 OTT services globally. Of course, consumers know probably 5 or 6 by name, the main ones. But then there's a lot of other niche services as well.
That is fascinating to me. And, it's also reminiscent of podcasting and its growth, with 700,000 podcasts out now and how those are verticalized also. What about on the local level?
Local level is a little bit different because mostly everything on the local level is news. Right? That's kind of the only thing you have local. You have some grassroots things locally that the technology is certainly being used well for when it comes to fundraising on a local level. Think about causes, environmental issues, and other things on a local level. But for the most part, local is all about news. So the local stations are really trying to figure out how do they keep and retain that consumer who they have the connection with, who typically knows their call sign. They're supplementing advertising with sponsorships because on a local level that tends to work better. But I certainly won't lie. On a local level, it's hard for a lot of them. A lot of them are struggling with that, and it's not the technology. Initially, they're sort of thrown off by the technology, but the technology is not complicated and it's not expensive. There are all these cloud services, Amazon, large ones, smaller ones that can make this real easy for you. SyncBack is another one. On a local level, there's all kinds you can look at for different pieces, whether it's content ingestion and transcoding, whether it's metadata management, whether it's monetization through ad insertion. So there's a lot you can do there, but it comes down to understanding what your audience wants.
I want to actually touch on the personal a little bit. I'm really fascinated by your military background, and I understand that you're still involved. You support a lot of former military and work with special ops to help with employment issues and your buddies. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting aspect of my life that, it's not up on my blog or my website. I don't have a website for it or whatnot. But basically, I didn't do anything special in the military. So I have no special military background. I've never been deployed. I never went downrange. I went in right after the first Desert Storm ended, and I got out before the second one started.
Smart man.
Smart or not, it's just the way it was.
You're the guy who had $70 million and it's gone. No, sorry.
Didn't have $70 million. But, in the last couple of years, I've had the privilege and have been very fortunate to work with our special operations community. So what we call SOF, S-O-F, Special Operations Forces, and in particular the Army Green Berets, which are special forces. And I do quite a lot with the different groups, but my main goal is really helping these guys get jobs. Mm-hmm. So most people don't know what special operations does because the only thing that they see is what's in a movie, which typically is wrong.
And usually has Bruce Willis.
We would not consider that special operations. No, that wouldn't be real.
Tom Cruise?
Definitely not.
I'll quit while I'm ahead.
No, we would put those in a different bucket I won't mention. But, people think that what these guys do is just run around, capturing high-value targets and kicking in doors. And what they don't realize, because they don't have access to it, and the American public doesn't even know we're still at war and still losing soldiers, is that these guys are the most highly trained individuals in the world in skill sets that any business can practically apply in their corporation immediately. Situational awareness, empathy, problem solving, right? These guys are planning things where somebody's life is dependent based on the job that they do. So I've been very fortunate to travel with them and to see what they do in person and have access inside different groups at different levels. I was out in Colorado last week with them for a couple days and got to train them. So I got to teach them a little bit about my industry and some of the things happening in the cloud and spend one-on-one time and figure out, okay, where do you want to go once you get out? And Very fortunate to be able to do that. And I've also been very fortunate to work with companies like Disney and NBC who have taken guys from my personal pipeline and hired them. So that's something that those companies see a huge value from these guys in. But man, I tell you, if the American public knew what they did and saw the level that they operated at, they'd get way more support than they get right now. Because most folks don't know that special forces are the ones taking all the casualties. They're on the front lines. You have one special forces group that's lost 4 soldiers just in the last 2 months. And you hear about that on the paper. For one day you hear that somebody,
Right.
Got unfortunately killed in action. But what you don't hear is that there were 4 other guys who were injured who were at Walter Reed.
Oh.
So when I go and visit the guys at Walter Reed, you sort of really see, okay, what do they need? What help do they need? So it's a very, very unique situation that I've been put in, and many of these folks have adopted me as their own, and they've become great friends and their families, and many have lived with me for a period of time as well, making the transition, and it's a real honor to be able to work with these guys every day.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What you might not know is that MediaVillage and Jack Myers has a division called Advancing Diversity, and we are honoring those in the media industry, marketing and entertainment segments who are working to attract and retain an inclusive group of employees. And one of our honorees is J. Michael Haney, who started the program at Syracuse, which is now in something like 40 states with colleges and universities to help veterans gain employment and education and make them ready for the working world again. So he's one of our inductees into the Advancing Diversity Hall of Honors. We'll have a job fair there as well on January 8th. It's being held at CES.
Okay, CES, great.
Yeah, so I hope that you'll come join us because that would be phenomenal to have you there and speak to some of our attending veterans as well. But we'll put links in the show notes to this, and we really appreciate you educating the Insider InSites listeners about this too. We'll do what we can to support you.
That's great. I appreciate it. The guys need as much support as they can, and there's a lot of really great companies out there, nonprofits, who are trying to help soldiers. But the problem is, a lot of them don't truly understand what they need.
Yep.
And also, they have no access to special operations because it's so unique. Yet those are the guys who need the most help.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't know that we were going to even go down that path, and this was really informative for me, and I hope for everyone else. So just to sort of wipe my tears and come back to the world of streaming services, tell me what your projection is for 2020. How
Confusion.
Big, how fast? Yeah.
Confusion. So we have Apple coming out November 1st. We've got Disney, I'm going to get this wrong, November 17th? No, November 18th? I forget. Middle of November.
On top of each other.
Almost, yep. And then you've got Quibi, I think, is supposed to be April. Peacock is around April time frame. HBO Max, we don't know. But we have so many good services coming out in the next 6 to 8 months that we're going to have just so much more awareness in the market. I think in the last month, I've probably done 50 media interviews.
Oof.
Yep, because all these companies are calling going, what's this Disney thing? What's this Apple thing? There's just so many. So that's good because the media will push out that these services are available. That obviously will bring confusion. But the next year is really all about these services getting out, launching, getting to scale.
Being marketed.
There's an amazing amount of money that's being pumped into this industry from a marketing standpoint, a content licensing standpoint, and a content production creation standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of money being spent there. But at some point down the line, these are going to have to be businesses that turn a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Or, as we talked about before, they're going to have to generate revenue from the company that's diversified in some other way. So the next year is really about getting these services out into the market. And then it's a matter of all these services competing with one another to a degree in terms of our eyeballs and figuring out, to your point, how do I market my service so that it's unique and different from others out there? And for some, that'll be a bit of a struggle. For others that have the breadth and depth of consumers and other services in the market like Disney, it'll be much easier.
So I'm going to give you an opportunity to have a baked-in ad. Where can we read your blog?
So you can go to my blog at streamingmediablog.com.
Oh, that's original.
Nice and simple, right? Right. And just so you know,
thank you for the lack of clarity. I mean, the lack of consumer confusion on that one.
Got to keep it simple. What do users want? And also on my blog, if you right at the top of the blog, the phone number that's listed there, that's my cell phone. I answer it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I've been doing that 20 years.
Wow.
So literally anybody has a question, it's free of charge. They can call me up. There's no cost. But as a result, I collect a huge amount of data.
Thought you were going to say money.
No, I don't. No, I don't do this for the money. Money doesn't drive anything with me.
We're going to have a chat, Dan. Another one.
Well, yeah, I have a different reason for doing what I do. It's if I grow the industry and I help the market grow, the industry takes care of me. Mm-hmm. You know, I think very differently than most people. I give away all my content on the blog for free. I do all media interviews for free. I do all speaking gigs for free at shows. I'm not in this. Money's not what drives me. Education is what drives me. So people always say, Dan, you're a principal analyst. You're a blogger. You do all this streaming stuff. How do you explain to people what you do? And I go, it's very simple. Very simple. My job is 3 things: to inform, empower, and educate others. That's it. Now, sometimes it's Wall Street, institutional money managers. During the net neutrality debate, I was asked by Congress and Senate to testify as an expert, which I didn't. I declined. So sometimes I'm dealing with those that are making laws. Sometimes it's Wall Street. Sometimes it's the content owners like a Hulu and CBS themselves. Other times it's vendors. Other times it's members of the media. But whoever it is, my job is just to educate. That's really all it is.
Fantastic. This was one of the most informative and giving and inspiring, educational and informing conversations I've had. Yeah, it was. And you give a lot. So thank you very, very much, Dan.
Well, thank you. I
Rayburn,
appreciate being here. It's a good time.
I'm E.B. Moss, and you've been listening to Insider InSites for MediaVillage. Check us out at MediaVillage.com, and I hope that you'll subscribe to Insider InSites wherever you listen to podcasts.